I'm Tamer Turkman from Study in America. Today I'm with the editor-in-chief of Forbes magazine, Steve Forbes, who will share his thoughts on the current state of Turkey.
Mr. Forbes, thank you very much for taking this time to meet with me. It's truly an honor.
Nice to meet with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to first start by asking your opinion of the rise in international student population here in the United States. This year alone, there's been a 15% increase in the number of foreign students studying here in the States, and bringing the number to roughly 700,000. What type of value does this carry to the U.S. economy, and what value does it have to the university itself, the university who is enrolling the students?
Well, I think clearly for students coming over here, they recognize the U.S. as a very formidable and highly well done university system. Mm-hmm. So you have the opportunity to get a first-rate education. For it also is, I think, good for students from abroad to see how the United States actually works. Mm-hmm. It's very hard to describe in a few sentences. You have to experience to see what makes this country tick. For the United States, I think it is a great boon because it brings in brains. And if I had been president, I would have proposed that any foreign student who received an advanced degree in the United States have a green card embossed in his or her diploma, to keep the brains here, because I think brains are mobile, and so people may not choose to spend their lives here, but spending a few years here would be beneficial to the United States.
Yes, in fact, it's when students just graduate, we speak with the students and we ask them to reflect on their past 4 years, and we see that it's a challenge sometimes for them to get back to their countries, because that 4 years, there's a bond, there's a change in their characters as well, from culture to mindset, and it's not easy for them to return sometimes. What type of advice would you give to an international student fresh out of high school, getting ready to leave family for the first time and come to the other side of the world to begin their undergraduate study?
Well, when you come to a new culture, just be prepared for culture shocks, both positive and negative. My wife, for example, was brought up in Europe, in France and Italy. Mm-hmm. Her father was American, but her mother was Belgian. Mm-hmm. But when she came over here to the United States to go to college, it was still a jolt to see what customs were, whether it was eating meals, drinking, and the like. So just be prepared. You're going to see things that are perhaps different from what you've grown up with, even if it's a traditional European country. Mm-hmm. Cultures are different. So just psychologically know that's going to happen. It's not unusual. The other thing is, in addition to your studies, try to see as much of the United States as you can, imbibe in the culture, both the crazy parts and the more substantive parts, so that you get a better understanding of what makes a society work. One of the characteristics of the United States is what we call civil society. Numerous volunteer organizations for every conceivable purpose. When Tocqueville, the Frenchman, visited the United States back in the 1830s, he had never seen so many what he called voluntary associations. So learn what these are. It's a unique part of unique part of the country that enables it to work. As Tocqueville says, it prepares people to be citizens of a republic.
Sometimes they find going back to their countries to be very challenging. As a new international college graduate turns back to their country to kickstart their professional careers, what type of advice can you offer them?
Well, when if they choose to go back and they wish to go into business, reflect on what you've learned in terms of what particular barriers there may be, what changes you should be advocating, and perhaps bridging in terms of your own business. Thanks to handhelds, it's very easy now to be international in terms of doing business in more than one country. Export-import have been around forever, But thanks to high technology, thanks to the microchip, it is very easy in terms of services, products, putting together supply chains. And it's a good lesson, because if you're going to put together a global supply chain as you get older, if you're interested in expanding a business, you have to learn how to deal with cultures. And one thing that a student going back who's going into business might bone up on is looking at things like doing business, a annual report put out each year by the World Bank evaluating 183 economies around the world, and everything from permits you need to set up a business, enforcing contracts, what it takes to export, import, all this seemingly boring stuff, but the kind of nitty-gritty that is essential to an efficient functioning of a business, productive functioning of a business. There are other surveys as well. The Heritage Foundation has a survey, what they call economic freedom. Companies like The Economist have what they call country intelligence background on particular countries. So don't be surprised if you go back that what you find in one place is not what you're going to find in another. Figure out, okay, how do I make something work, even though you have two very different cultures?
The majority of our viewers are young professionals in Turkey and Azerbaijan. In Turkey, there has been a 70% increase in US MBA applications just in the past 5 years, and this trend is continuing. What type of value does a top MBA degree in the States provide to an international student?
Well, first of all, it shows that you have the stick-to-itiveness, you have the brains to get through the process. So you're not just somebody who's going to sit back and expect the world to come to you. It shows you have initiative. It also gives you, in terms of learning how businesses can operate, giving you the tools to enable you to move ahead. And also the contacts you get in terms of international contacts. So moving ahead, trying to put something together. The people part is also not part of the formal curriculum, but absolutely very helpful in the years ahead.
Since we work closely with students from Azerbaijan, I would like to also touch on the Commonwealth independent states. Just a decade ago, there was only 10 students from Azerbaijan in total studying in the States. Now that number is over 2,000, and they expect a 50% increase during the next year. The government also is a sponsor to its top students who are interested in U.S. study. The same applies to Kazakhstan, which sends thousands of students to America through their Bolshak program. Both countries are also exploring exchange relationships with top universities here in the States. How are these countries expanding so quickly? Can you give us your take on these governments' mindsets and ideologies?
Well, I think that what countries are beginning to recognize is that the real source of capital is the human mind. And when you look at areas around the world, such as Hong Kong, which has no natural resources, has to import its own water. And what that's been able to do by developing mines, Singapore, Switzerland and Europe, other areas. So when China recognized this back in the 1920s, when it started to send students to the United States and elsewhere, and it was interrupted after the Japanese invasion in 1937, and then 40 years of communism. But in the late 70s, when Deng Xiaoping got power in Beijing, China resumed that modernization program. So times and circumstances change, but the key is if you have people who have learned to use their minds in the way that athletes use their muscles, you'll be able to move ahead and quickly take advantage of changes in technology. Not just high technology or inventing it, but oftentimes the value added comes from how you use it. For example, here in the United States, mainframe computers came out of the Second World War to help better calculate where artillery shells would go. Obviously, it had much wider applications than artillery shells. But the one who probably made the most money from mainframe computers was not those who made the machines. Even IBM faltered in the early 1990s. It's come back and is a major company again. The one who made the most money was Sam Walton. Walmart, small Northwest Arkansas retailer in the early 1960s. Kmart and others were 50 to 100 times the size of Walmart. But Walton figured out that if he managed information, managed inventories, and then ultimately supply chains, he could beat companies much bigger than him at their own game. Retailing has been around forever. So it's not just the technology, it's how you use it that often is value added, and that comes from the brain. You take the microchip, sand, expanding the reach of the human brain. It's amazing. Even natural resources like oil. What is oil in and of itself? Glop, gooey stuff. You can't eat it, can't even feed it to camels. It's just goo. Human mind that turned this goo into something that the modern world can't live without. So training the mind, getting technical expertise, getting exposure to other cultures, learning where you can find out how to get best practices. Information travels very quickly, so if it works there, one of the things that happened in the U.S. in the 70s, which was seen as a terrible decade, Japan was doing well in manufacturing as companies went over there and found out, okay, just-in-time inventory management can work if you have certain systems in place. So we adapted it here. And so having an openness to best practices, having an openness to know how to use things for value added is where you get the real sustainable growth, not something in the ground, but the brains that can use those things in the ground and elsewhere. And one of the things that I think, just to throw some gratuitous advice to countries like Azerbaijan, is, I can say this because I'm not holding office, be aware of the IMF. They come in with bad ideas on economics. And one of the things that still plagues Turkey today, and did plague Turkey when Özal was in office, trying his reforms, is inflation, devaluing the currency. Currency stability is a good thing. Low tax rates are good. Removing barriers to business, good. So I think if we had had better institutions 20 years ago, Özal would have even been more successful, because the bane of Turkey has been inflation, and the IMF for that is useless.
I have a question from a student from Koç University. This student, his name is Ediz Karahasanoğlu. He's also the #1 ranked student of his class. He says, my economics professor is very fond of Mr. Forbes. In one of our recent lectures, he taught us Mr. Forbes' 5 principles of economic growth. When we asked if Turkey's environment fostered free markets to flourish, he simply left it to us to debate. In your opinion, does Turkey meet these principles and have that infrastructure necessary to grow?
Turkey is beginning to meet those basic principles, and one of the key ones that it has to focus on is, of course, property rights, the rule of law. Turkey's made some progress there, but the courts have got to become a little more efficient in Turkey. On the tax side, on the personal income tax side, they could make a little more progress there. Reduce the role of the government. I know they've been making some progress there, but government is still going back to traditions of the 20s, 30s, still very much involved in parts of the economy. Reducing that would be helpful. But key is the getting a stable monetary policy, and reducing the role of the, I think 3 government banks still control about 1/3 of the deposits in the country, moving those frontiers back so that Turkey can develop a more and more growing middle class that can thrive in a global marketplace.
I have a question from a student. She's a graduate student, government student at Johns Hopkins. Her name is Esra Alemdar. What avenues of cooperation do you think the United States and Turkey should concentrate on given current international challenges,
Well, there's no question there are very real political tensions between the current government and the United States. One thing about, if you allow democracy to unfold, is that governments can change. So you have to look beyond the current difficulties to things like, is there room in the years ahead for more of a free trade agreement? Right now, this administration in Washington is not much interested in trade. I think that'll change after 2012. So that is there a scope for a true free trade agreement? One of the things about the EU is that it involves so much politics. In my mind, the EU, the European Union, should have been truly a free trade association instead of trying to recreate Charlemagne's empire out of Brussels. So if we focus on reducing trade barriers, I think that would be very helpful. And again, each country liberalizing so that you move barriers to people being able to do things without looking over their shoulder, wondering who's listening and that kind of thing, would be very healthy, both politically and economically.
As a follow-up to this question, and also as a follow-up to your issue of trade, I know that you have a strong presence in Turkey and a strong presence in Israel. And as allies to both countries, what advice would you give to both governments to try to soothe things?
Well, I think the government in Turkey should not see its relations with Israel's neighbors as either or. As a matter of fact, it should be pushing internal economic liberalization and pushing that in countries like Syria. It's no secret Turkey and Syria had some very rocky relations.
Yes.
They've improved recently, but Syria is still very much of a statist economy, very backwards, and it should not be the case. Turkey should see itself as spreading the gospel, you might say, of Switzerland, Hong Kong, Singapore, of reducing the presence of the state, saying we were once very statist, we felt we had to do it in the early years, but in the world today we have to follow the example of Ozal and others and truly liberalize the economy. And we're prospering. Yes, we were hit in 2009 as everyone else, but before that we were growing. And you got to do the same thing. So instead of taking things as they are in the Middle East, Turkey should see itself as the change agent.
How do you view Turkey's overall economical and political importance to the world right now?
Well, Turkey's geography guarantees that it's a critical country. And Turkey's economy has been making some changes. The reforms, I think, have slowed down recently. But the spirit of Ozal should be fiercely renewed. And Turkey should see itself as, because of its unique location, as a country that truly is a bridge, and and its power will come not from trying to win favor of regimes that are in disfavor in other parts of the world, but as saying, we're making these changes, we are moving ahead, behold, we are going to be pushing you or urging you to do the same thing. So instead of accepting the status quo in some of these states, say, you don't have to be backwards, we're moving forward, so can you. And that's where Turkey's real power would come.
The hottest topic in Turkey, and that is EU. They've been denied over and over again, and the country feels like they should be accepted now. Wanted to get your take on that.
You don't have to mix politics and economics. What Turkey should do, knowing that especially now with Europe in economic stagnation, that the environment's going to be better if Europe's on a growth path. What Turkey should do is have the approach of make yourself an irresistible partner by pushing hard on removing those remaining barriers to doing business, vaulting to the top in the World Bank survey of doing business, putting in a streamlined flat tax system, even though the IMF will scream and yell. Say low rates. Look what the Irish did. Yes, the Irish have been hit hard by the recession, but in a generation and a half, Ireland went from the poorest economy in Western Europe to the most dynamic. It did so by aggressively seeking foreign investment. Bureaucracy in Turkey makes it very difficult, sometimes very difficult to chart through. Streamline that. Do what the Irish did in throwing out tax holidays and incentives. Slash your corporate tax rates, about 20 now. You don't have it on manufacturing, but in effect zero it out for everybody. and go for rapid growth, because what that'll do, if Turkey is seen as a dynamic, India, China, rapidly growing, then suddenly people are going to be coming to you. Rather than you knocking on the door, they're going to be knocking on your door, saying this is a place to be. It opens up so many other parts of the world. We can start to trust the judiciary system. The bureaucracy is being pushed back, so it's much easier to do business, much more comfortable. And then you have the cards. You've got the aces. And you can then be in a position to where the EU is going to be changing. There's just a feeling that Strasbourg and Brussels are becoming much too bureaucratic. So Turkey in the next decade could be seen as going into an EU that's going to be much more trade economic oriented than trying to do this backdoor political unification that the people of Europe don't want. Because part of the thing in the EU is worry about immigration. And if you deal with immigration as a separate thing, that it doesn't mean everyone's going to be moving from Istanbul to Paris.
Right.
I think it just lowers the temperature a lot. So you have a combination of the EU refocusing on economics and not backdoor political reunification, which Europe does not want, and a more vibrant Europe, which will be, I think, be pushed by Central and Eastern Europe. They've been hit hard by the recession, but they were growing rapidly before the recession, and they will grow rapidly when this thing gets recovered in the next 2 or 3 years. If Europe's more confident economically, Turkey is seen as a font of liberalization that is not only helping its own economy, but actually starting to have an impact on its neighbors in the Middle East in a positive way, reducing the statism in those, paralytic statism in those governments. Would certainly give cover to countries like Jordan, which want to liberalize. Then it would be seen as, oh, this is very different. This is not the 1600s.
Thank you very much for your time. Your words were very valuable, I'm sure, to our viewers, to the young minds of Turkey who are looking ahead.
Great, thank you.